Boa is gone. Finished. No more. Do not build this pistol anymore. What's poppin', everyone? It's your boy Levi, and Magnum Boa has been changed to an amp pistol, meaning last season's Boa Mavericks build is no longer viable. The current strongest builds for Rozzi in Season 8 are the 4-zone Electron Blaster build seen here, and the 3-zone Glock build. This video is going to focus on the 4-zone Electron Blaster build, as voted by y'all in my community tab. Thanks. The first thing you want to do before loading into game is check your starting zones. Typically this build starts Hotel and goes into Avenue second. You always want to start in the most crowded zone because that's going to be the hardest to get your items in. I'll go into this more in depth and also state the one case where you wouldn't want to do this on my community tab. If both zones are equal, it's a little faster to start in Hotel. I promise the hardest part of this build is at the start, so don't let this next bit discourage you. When you spawn in Hotel, the fastest way to optimize this build is to eat your bread and drink your water. It'll just make things smoother. If you're not comfortable playing without early game food, you can always keep your bread, but you still need to drink your water. You'll slow down a bit for inventory space, but you'll have better food. You only need one distribution, so grab your items and path towards the Hyperloop. The only extra items you'll need are carbonated water and whiskey. Do not combine them though. Next up is Avenue, and you're going to notice that your inventory is going to get pretty scuffed really quick. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you'll get honey quickly. Use honey to make cola and then whiskey cocktail. This is going to be your SP. You can drink or drop the excess cola and honey. Grab the rest of your items, and if you're crafting what you can as you go, you'll be level 2 on the way to Alley. And let's pause here. If you hyperlooped into the bottom half of Avenue from Hotel, you're going to WQ this chicken because it's faster than basic attacking for the leather. Grab the leather and then grab these rocks if they're here, and then hyperloop into Alley. If you're on the top side of Avenue, you're going to kill these chickens in the middle and grab the leather. Just grab one, you'll get the second one later, and then walk up to Alley for the rocks near the entrance. In Alley, you'll want to call in paper and grab rocks first if you didn't already do so. This will clean up the rest of your inventory and you'll be good from here on out. I typically path up towards the Alley Hyperloop, but if this inside distribution where I am now is already looted, I'll path down towards Temple Hyperloop. For extra items here, I like grabbing at least one lighter. I'll pick up the 3 though if available. I'll usually only go out of my way for the first one though. Important thing here is that you hang around for the wolves. If you path up towards Alley Hyperloop, it's the top wolves. If towards Temple Hyperloop, take the bottom ones. Typically, when I'm fast, I'll get to wolves 5 to 10 seconds before they spawn, and I'll have time to use the lighter to make heated stone. Off the wolves, you'll get your final leather, and then meat. If you kept your bread, you can turn these into burgers, but if you ate your bread like me, make steak. If you have tons of time before the wolves spawn and you path towards the Alley Hyperloop, you can grab potatoes for baked potatoes, which is a little bit better than steak. When you're done, move on to Pond. Pond is our final zone, and we finish our build here. Here's a few notes to watch out for though while you're here. First thing is that this is a high traffic area during night 1. Players come in and out of Temple for Tree of Life, so be on the lookout. Secondly is that your priorities here are Meteorite if it spawns, then Bears. If Meteorite spawns up here on the top side of Pond, you can try to contest it. However, if you notice that there's a bad matchup running around Pond, or there's more than one person in the area, I honestly don't even bother going up there. It's not game winning if you get it, and Rozzi is very susceptible to third party. You will get politic. If you get it, awesome. Slam it into Shield of Kings. If there isn't a Meteorite spawning, or you don't get it, go for Bears. They're a nice chunk of XP. Our next objective is the Battle Zone, and we're going to be farming up until it starts. Quick note, if the movement speed Battle Zone happens to be in Pond, I usually just grab Pond Vision, farm up Avenue, and hang around the Pond area gates to try and pick someone off if I have the good matchup. If the zone is anywhere else, I head down to Hospital. Very rarely do I run into anyone here, and usually all the hunts are up still. Of course, the one game I pick for my guide, I do happen to run into people. I usually avoid killing enemies in the early game when I do guide videos, so I can show you what items you'll typically have at this point. You should 100% take these fights in the real game. Luke and Sewer are both decent matchups for Rozzi. Hospital Wolves on occasion are gone, but everything else should be respawning. If for whatever reason you're slow on time, like say if you did end up taking those hospital fights, go to the Hyperloop and enter the movement speed battle zone. You should still have lots of time though, so we're going to continue heading down to the right side of Factory. In Factory, we continue on with the hunts, following the right side path to the Hyperloop, and stock up on food if we need. Because there is much less hunts here in Factory, we can use the time to get some food prep. I like to make stir-fried ramen if I can. It's one zonable here in Factory and some of the best food in the game. You can also prep pelt if you find a gun and grab any binoculars you see for cameras. This isn't entirely necessary, but it's nice to do while we're here. When you make it to the Hyperloop, which if you're on time, you should with about 5 to 10 seconds left in the night, I believe as long as you have at least 4 seconds, the game will let you Hyperloop into a battle zone, but don't quote me on that. Hyperloop into the movement speed zone. We choose the movement speed battle zone for a few reasons. Rozzi is a very matchup dependent character, and the bonus movement speed is going to help neutralize some of the bad ones. Typically, a lot of melees come to the movement speed zone so they can run fast and get on top of their target. And that's basically what Rozzi wants. She's good at kiting melee. She struggles, however, into long range characters and mages that can keep their distance. The movement speed buff helps her get onto these targets. Don't underestimate dodging an incoming spell with W with the movement speed buff. You can pull off some really clean movement with the speed. If you lost the battle zone, I like to respawn in an empty wolf zone. You respawn with half health, so don't pick a crowded one. I like to pick a zone with a wolf camp because they're usually respawning around this time. Once you've healed and farmed a little bit, I like to call in a tree or a meteorite so I'm on pace with transition, and then contest the one that I didn't fall that night. If you win the battle zone, you'll always want to farm out the rest of the hunts in the zone. They're free XP, and most importantly, it's very safe to do so. While you're doing so, this gives you time to pick out your reward. You'll have a few options for the reward. Let's take a look at our stats real quick. I wanted us to take note of the crit chance specifically. On base build, we have 63% crit. Crits in Eternal Return operate pseudo-randomly, and what I mean by this is that crits aren't entirely random for multi-hit characters. For characters with a multi-hit basic attack, you'll want 67% crit optimally. This ensures that you will crit on at least one of the hits every single time. On 63%, it's very unlikely you get a double non-crit, but it theoretically is possible. Whether you have 1, 2, or even possibly 3 transitions at this point, I like to call in a resource with the transfer console. If you grab a meteorite from the battle zone and built it into Shield of Kings, we will retain the 63% and gain some AP and defense. Consider this the neutral option. If we opt for Tree of Life for Alexander, we can boost our crit ratio to 67%, ensuring that we have guaranteed crit. We will also gain AP and movement speed. Consider this the offensive option. And finally, if we go Mithril, I like to use it for Myth Armor. This will drop our crit rate to 37%, but we will get a ton more defense and attack speed. This is the defensive option. You can also go for Arc Reactor if you want. I personally hate that the active works on walking direction and not mouse position, so I don't use it. It can be a great tool for Rozzi because it allows her to go through walls. The stats aren't that bad for her either, and I would take it every game if it was on mouse position. All this will be up on my community tab, so don't worry if it sounds complicated. A few things to consider when choosing which transition to go. Think of where your battle zone is. If you had a battle zone in Forest, the section is now closed off to players, meaning if you won, you're the only player left in there. 99% of the time, that's going to mean that you also get the Tree of Life in there without wasting extra timer to walk into the zone. It would make more sense to grab a Mithril or a Meteorite in that case, so then you can stay for the tree. Same thing if a Meteorite is spawning in the zone. Grab a Mithril or tree, and then get the Meteorite. We're currently in the transitions meta, so try and upgrade as many slots as you can. When you're done at the transfer console, it's likely to be night again. You have a few plays you can make, but they're typically all one and the same. You'll want to return to the bear zone for farm some mastery again. You can return to pond if you took them on night 1. You know they're guaranteed to be respawning now. The only issue with the pond bears is that they're very close to hospital tree. I find that a lot of mages go to this hospital tree and they can be a little problematic for Rozzi if they decide to check pond bears after. It's not guaranteed, but it does happen on occasion. If you're on time for pond bears the first time, they'll respawn a little bit earlier than the tree spawns, so you can get them and get out quick. If I don't think pond will be safe, or the zone is closed, I usually check alley or another bear zone. These bears are likely to be up, but just be careful if a mega or a battle zone is spawning in on the next day. People might be lurking around them. If you do feel strong, you can contest another rare resource. Once again, if it's more than a 1v1, I wouldn't bother. I went for Meteorite in Avenue and got contested by an Ava. Typically, Ava is a bad matchup, but I was able to use the chicken to almost surprise her with a gap close. If you can get on top of Ava, there's nothing she can really do. Just don't let her spam her abilities while you're on the Meteorite. Kathy probably figured I was low from the fighting the Ava, but forced the fight when she realized I wasn't. This wasn't a good fight for Kathy because she didn't really have anywhere to get the wall stun on me. Like I said earlier, try to find a bear zone if you can. Thankfully, temple bears were still up, so I took those before a mega spawn. If you lost the first battle zone, you should show up to the second one 100%. If the movement speed battle zone isn't available, I like to go to shield battle zone if there's a lot of melee characters left, and the offensive battle zone if there's a lot of range characters. If you win the battle zone and you have the force core option available, always go for it. If not, follow the same logic as before. You want the sum of the most good parts in your inventory, so try not to replace anything if you don't have to. If you lose this battle zone, you're likely only to have 1 or 2 transitions at this point. If you have more, you can try and rat for placement, but you're still probably one of the weaker players in the lobby. Normally, this would be the escape angle, but I'm still not entirely sure if escaping is ever worth it. If escaping gets buffed at some point, this would be the time to do it. If you won the first battle zone, and if you feel like you're strong, you can go Omega. Just remember it's the same as fighting any objective as Rozzi. If it's a 1v1, you're pretty good to contest. If If anyone else shows up, you're probably getting politicked. You should still definitely go, because a lot of the time I'm in a 1v1 and someone tries to take Omega, I'll actually concede Omega for the chance to pick up a kill. Think about what Rozzi is good at. There's a reason why we go to all these battle zones and not objectives a lot of the time. If I were to peel off the kill and head back to Omega, I'm probably not going to get that 4 score anyway. You'll end up just doing the reset dance and waste time. Even if I don't get the kill, that's still a lot of matchup. If you do get Omega, use the 4 score for either Kelt or Dice. And finally, if you won the first battle zone and you don't feel strong enough to contest Omega, you can always just farm for credits again. And honestly, this is the position I find myself in most of the time. I don't think it's necessarily a bad play. Just you don't get a lot out of it. This is where if you do end up getting enough credits, you'll want to call it in for blood, but most of the time you'll probably just get another 4 score. If you have 67% crit, I like to use this 4 score for Kelt. The attack range will help you in combat, and the bonus movement speed is a good utility tool, and it lets you keep your lifesteal in your items. If you have less than 67% crit, I like to go Dice of Destiny. It won't bring your crit up to guaranteed crit range, but it increases your crit damage. You'll have to forego lifesteal though. For blood, you want to go Burgundy most of the time, and Blood Ripper on occasion. This is the only time I would replace a transition if you already have one. If, like me, you contested a Knight 2 meteorite, or you got a Knight 2 tree, you can call in the other component to make 4 score. Then make Kelt or Dice again. When it's getting close to Wick spawn, if there are any dead bodies around, you're going to want to try and pick up a headpiece. Honestly, anything but Motor Helm will do. I should have grabbed Sua's headpiece here, but I honestly just forgot. You'll have the second one passive on Burgundy, so you no longer need the Crusader's helmet. And all the amp helms other than Motor Helm have good defense, so you can wear them. If you do have time before Wick spawns, take some hunts and prep Burgundy. If you have Myth armor and don't have a transition arm slot, you can go Blood Ripper to keep your helmet. I wouldn't give up a transition to do so, but it does allow you to keep second wind on your helm if you don't have a backup. You'll also want to stock up on food if you're low. Wick time, baby, and the higher elo you get, the more you'll want to come to Wick. I get this question a lot. What do I do if I don't feel confident playing around Wick? Well, the only way to get better at it is to practice doing so. And I'm not gonna lie, I died a ton around Wick trying to take it, trying to stop people from taking it, trying to position better around it in seasons 4 and 5, and I'm still really not that good at positioning around it. It is a necessary skill to learn, and I recommend limit testing with it. At the very least, if you show up to Wick, you'll probably discourage someone else from taking it for free. This is a prime example of why you should shadow Wick. One thing to remember is that at this point, the buff is worth more than transition. Obviously, if you can help it, you'll want to grab both. But if someone else is on it or someone is contesting you, don't put yourself in a bad position getting free hit trying to get some items. I follow this Rozzi tracking it down, and I'm able to stop her from getting it for free. She wastes E on it trying to burn it down, and I probably could kill her fairly easily if I chased her down. That would mean leaving Wick wide open though. I honestly should have turned for Wick quicker than what I did, because Wick is the priority. Take whatever transitions you have left, and if you're fully transitioned, remember that Zen Vitality, Tear of Selene, and Holy Water exist. Because you're now the strongest in the lobby, you basically have free reign to do whatever you want within reason. Don't go into a 1v3 expecting to get clips for your highlight montage. You will get teamed on because you have Wick. Instead, use your presence to force people out of areas that you want to be in. I like to go around and make sure I can grab the gold boxes that are spawning. These potentially mean better transitions, or traps, or consumables that you can stop other players from getting stronger with. Because there's currently a bot apocalypse running through every lobby in NA, I was able to get an unclaimed meteorite that spawned earlier in the game. I had an extra meteorite at one point, and I went Tear of Selene, but I definitely should have opted into Pegasus as my headpiece when I had it. This extra meteorite is definitely a luxury this game. Most games you're going to have to go with any high defense head slot you can find. And we've reached the end game, so it's time to do a few last minute checks. Whatever credits you have left should be used for calling in food components like lighters, oils, etc., and cameras. Make sure to check if you have an ISIL or a Nathapon or even a Barbara in your lobby. You'll probably want to make use of traps, so call in gunpowder and batteries for EMP drones. I've talked many times in the channel about how to ABC a safe zone. If you want a separate guide on how to do so, then I can include it in my complete beginner's guide series, card above. Just let me know down in the comments, and maybe also leave a like and subscribe if the guide has been helpful so far. Some tips I can offer with this build is that if you're finding yourself low on SP a lot, or having a hard time managing SP items in the early game, you can always take the Spirit Culling Augment instead of Dismantle Goliath. You'll do less damage overall, but you'll never run out of SP. That will also give you one more inventory slot in the early game, since you won't need to worry about whiskey cocktails. Never be afraid to just not take a fight with a bad matchup. Rozzi unfortunately is really susceptible to snares and roots. If you end up getting snared or rooted while you're Wing, you'll end up standing still as a flutter. And if this ever happens, the fight or your escape is usually just doomed. Also, you generally need your ult to kill most of the time in the early and mid game, If you miss or you don't get the explosion proc, sometimes I just abandon the fight, even if it looks like I'm winning. You probably won't have the damage to finish them off. It's frustrating, but discipline is something you need to learn as a player for Eternal Return. The final tip would be to play around vision. If you do get the jump on someone, you are very good at killing them quickly, like with that Ava earlier. Careful about how close you put yourself next to a melee if it is one, but vision advantage is a great way to neutralize a bad matchup. Some final tips for the final zone is to use your range and basic attacks if you can. You're probably maxed out on mastery, so you'll do a ton of damage. Don't be afraid to play slow and use your abilities to create space rather than to engage on someone. They have to fight you in this square, so as long as you're kiting or dodging spells, you'll win on timer advantage. This has been a much more in-depth guide than normal. This game came a long way since when I first started playing, and there's definitely more to playing than just running around and killing people. Try breaking down the early, middle, and late game and focusing on one aspect at a time. I have a mirror match with Rozzi, and we're very similar in builds. I just happen to be up in mastery. Typically, the Rozzi mirror match is won by whoever gets their E off first, because if you E second, you're likely to put yourself in between Rozzi and the wall for the stun. At this point, you'll lose damage by Eing, and if you dodge the ult, there's no real reason to E into the Rozzi. She does a good job of timing out my Wick buff, but she ends up overstepping, probably expecting me to engage forward like she did. If you have any questions about the game or Rozzi, let me know down in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them. Once again, keep an eye out on the community tab because I go into detail about tips on the game all the time. If you are looking for less specific character tips, make sure to check out my tips and tricks playlist or my beginner's guide playlist that you can find in the end screen.